Ooh. All right, everyone, and we are live on the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman, and I'm joined today by the lovely, talented, and dear friend, Jane McGonigal. Hello, Jane.
Hi, Gabe. Hi, gamification community.
Hello, everybody. So exciting to have you here for this amazing session. And I don't know if you know this, but Jane has this great new book called SuperBetter. You can pre-order at Amazon. I'm gonna put the link right up on the screen. It's actually been chosen. We just found out it's been chosen as one of the best books by Amazon right now. So you can join the group of people who are super excited about this great new book, SuperBetter, and pre-order your copy today. In the meantime, if it's your first time on Gamification Revolution, welcome you guys. Every couple of weeks, typically around 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern, you'll join me and a guest talking about engagement and gamification right here. And if it's your first time and you're joining us live, please log in with one of your social media contact profiles like Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and you can come and ask Jane and I questions. You can post those questions. Some of them are already queued and waiting to go. You can also chat with your fellow viewers, and you can even come on screen if you've got a great question to ask. If you're listening to us on the podcast or on the video podcast, welcome. Try to join us live at some point. And it's so nice to see all of our regulars, Michael, Sasha, David, Lori. So nice to see you again. Tiago, hello, everybody. It's like an episode of the Reading Rainbow. Here we are with our
I was going to say
new
it's like
reunion.
cheers where everyone knows your name.
Hey, the same thing, except now we're online. And this is pure vodka.
Ooh,
So just like cheers.
could
Uh,
be, could be.
mhm. It's a good morning in New York City. Okay, so Jane, you've written this new book called Super Better, and I know that many people know the personal story of how kind of Super Better came to be, and you've talked about a lot of a tremendous and inspiring story. Can you give us kind of the brief version of the genesis of why you decided to turn what happened to you, and why you decided to turn that into like a system that people could actually use?
Yeah, so I mean, you know me, I'm a big science geek. I like to understand why things work. And after I invented SuperBetter and I saw that other people with incredibly difficult challenges were using it and were reporting these really profound effects, being happier and feeling stronger and braver and better understood by their friends and family for things that were more serious than my own challenge, which had been a mild traumatic brain injury. I was hearing from people who were fighting cancer, who had just been diagnosed with ALS, who had lost, their husband of 20 years and was in the process of grieving. I mean, the worst things you can imagine. And they were profoundly transformed by this game. So, of course, I wanted to understand how could this be? Because even for a proponent of games like yourself or myself, to have it be effective in that kind of a huge stakes scenario seemed to even me to be unlikely. So I wanted to dig into the science and understand and see if I could formalize based on the research I was uncovering and by analyzing data from our players, formalize a system so that anybody could tap into this gameful mindset. And so that's, the book comes out of 5 years of me digging in the scientific literature, but also data from almost 500,000 players who were using an online version of SuperBetter. So the book is really very much data driven and science driven. And so for geeks like us, that's very exciting. That's how we understand the world.
Was it hard? I know that you worked with some universities to validate some of the ideas as well in the book. Was it hard? Can you talk about the process of turning your vision for this gameful system to improve people's lives into a scientifically proven approach to do that? Was that hard?
Yeah, this is a really exciting time for people working in game design or gamification because there are a lot of researchers interested in understanding this. So I was actually lucky that two different research groups reached out to me independently and said, we would like to study SuperBetter. So there's a psychology group at University of Pennsylvania who wanted to study it specifically for depression, and the Medical Research Center at Ohio State University that wanted to study it for traumatic brain injury. And that was really interesting because obviously I invented it for myself for a mild traumatic brain injury. So that made a lot of sense that OSU would want to test it. And we actually got funding from the NIH to do that as a clinical trial. So that was a very rigorous study, not just to see what the impact was, which the results, which are in the book, are very positive. It did improve depression and anxiety and suffering during the recovery and rehabilitation, but also to see, could we get doctors to use this game? Could doctors learn how to be gameful and prescribe patients power-ups and help identify their patients' bad guys and come up with battle strategies, help them think of quests every day. So that was really cool to be able to see, look, doctors can actually prescribe this kind of a gameful experience. And then the Penn study, for them to be interested in depression, because I suffered so much depression and anxiety during my own recovery, there was a kind of intuition that it would be particularly helpful to other people. And those results were, just published in the Games for Health journal, which was going through the peer review process and having our stats run by all these different people to see if it was actually on target was great. And again, that held up, playing for 6 weeks, reduced solved 6 symptoms of depression, which is a really terrific outcome.
Well, I guess one question that comes up a lot, and I'm curious to know if you have an opinion about this from a SuperBetter standpoint, is there a set of things that games, gamification, gameful play, or SuperBetter itself cannot help with? Because it seems like there's a good laundry list of things that we can help with.
Yes, what a great question. I am increasingly coming to believe that any kind of gamification project, and definitely SuperBetter, we've seen in our experience of the data, is less and less helpful the more, the more happy and motivated and totally at peace with your life that you are, if that makes sense. So with SuperBetter, we found that the more you were suffering, actively wrestling with a challenge that you felt overwhelmed by, the more it helped. And this was really counterintuitive, because you would think, oh, fun and games, that'll only work for, little problems, but big problems, you can't be all fun and games about that. But it was actually the opposite. And as we sort of dug into the user experience and dug into the psychology of it, what I'm seeing is that when we approach extremely difficult challenges in everyday life, things that we're overwhelmed by, stressed out by, made anxious by, or depressed by, that is when we are least likely, just instinctively, to be gameful, to bring those psychological strengths that we bring to games, because that's just not how we approach the biggest challenges in our lives. So it's those people who are helped the most, the people for whom this is the most 180-degree shift in the mindset that they're bringing. Whereas if you're just tackling a kind of, a feel-good goal, oh, I want to train for my first 10K race, or I want to get healthier, I want to eat healthier or something. If you're not really kind of suffering or overwhelmed in some way, at least the kind of game design that I do doesn't seem to be as helpful for you. So that was, I don't know, I find that intriguing and kind of exciting, but I also have to tell people, people who are really happy and healthy and loving life, they may not need this kind of gameful design or gamification right now.
Well,
they might need it later.
And it's interesting because we've got a lot of questions from people about the kind of specific, some of the design things and some of the conclusions about it. But one of my observations from reading your book, which was excellent, by the way, and so exciting to have you turn your ideas into something that was so actionable, and like so full of little games and things that people can actually play and turn into an experience. And I love that kind of practical, sort of useful book. So that was very exciting to me. So one of the words that it takes you a little while to use this word in the book, and to me it was the recurring theme of it, is resilience. Mm-hmm. And kind of dovetailing what you talked about. So resilience has become this really hot topic. This idea that it's a tremendous predictor of success. It's a tremendous predictor of how well, obviously, people will do with their lives as a whole. So can you talk a little bit about specifically what you've observed as SuperBetter contributing to the resilience of people, particularly?
Yeah, well, why don't we zoom out even, and we can talk about all games, because all games are resilience building. And this is one of, I think, the most solid pieces of research coming out of the science of games for the last 20 years. And that's something I'm trying to round up research, on all games, right? Not just SuperBetter.
Sure.
And I think for me, one of the biggest aha moments was really understanding the neuroscience of resilience and why games contribute to it. So one piece of resilience is having enough optimism and physical energy and self-motivation to keep trying when things are hard and to believe that the goal that you're striving for is worth the effort. Now, it turns out that one of the biggest contributors to your ability to have that optimistic, self-motivated, resilient mindset is how much dopamine you have available in the reward pathways of your brain. So we think of sometimes of like willpower or work ethic as being a moral virtue, but it just turns out the more dopamine you have coursing through the reward pathways, whenever you think, is this goal worth the effort, your brain is likely to focus on the possibility for a positive outcome and really amplify that in its sort of calculations and downplay the effort required. So if you're like, oh, is it, I have to write another draft of this op-ed that I'm working on, and I've already rejected it twice, like, should I try a third time? If I have a lot of dopamine, by the way, that's a problem that I'm working on right now. If I have a lot of dopamine,
I figured it wasn't abstract. Yeah, that would have been a very interesting abstract example. If you guys are all working on op-eds right now and you're struggling with it, I want you to know SuperBetter will work for you.
But if you have more dopamine coursing through your brain, you're more likely to say the goal is worth it. I'm going to keep trying. In fact, when you're clinically depressed, that's one of the things that we know happens. You don't have dopamine. In fact, when you have a traumatic brain injury, you also don't have enough dopamine in your reward pathways. You literally can't imagine that any effort is worth it or that any positive outcome is likely, which is why so many people get depressed and suicidal when they have a traumatic brain injury. So video games and many games, it doesn't just have to be digital, they increase the amount of dopamine in the reward pathways as much as methamphetamines injected intravenously. So that's something we've known for almost 25 years now in the scientific literature. That's how big a dopamine rush you get from games. And the reason you get it is because every time you take an action in a game, your brain is like, oh, something good might happen. I might hit the target, or I might confound my opponent, or I might score a goal. You keep anticipating a positive outcome. Every time you, even just swapping candies in Candy Crush Saga, every time you try something, your brain is like, ooh, might work. I can't wait to find out. And so every time you have an opportunity to see if you're successful, you get a dopamine hit. So you think of, particularly in digital games where you're making decisions every 3 seconds, that's where you get this, kind of intravenous, drug dopamine rush. So that is a huge factor in how games increase resilience. And in gamification or gameful design, one thing you can do is try to increase the opportunity that somebody has for making these little predictions, seeing a possible outcome. In SuperBetter, we try to get people to really narrow down their goals to, what can you do in the next 5 minutes that could possibly help? What is the smallest, possible step that you could take so we can just keep getting those dopamine hits?
Right. And Manuel was talking kind of in the chat, a little chat discussion about this idea of focusing on these smaller things. And I'll say, one thing that I definitely noticed in your book, SuperBetter, is you talk a bunch about Candy Crush Saga, which, by the way, is very reassuring to all of us who are children of Candy Crush players, who have lost our parents to Candy Crush. So it was probably very exciting to see a positive spin on the addiction of Candy Crush. But I guess my question for you, because you sort of brought it up there, is so there's all this research about how games do this to people, and then there's all these skeptics about whether or not that is real world enough. Like, oh yeah, that's great, like in the game world, and then there's this small effect for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Because we're sampling people like immediately afterwards. Can you talk about the real, which is for some people is a big leap between the things we're doing in the virtual world and then what happens in the real world?
Yeah. So this is why I wanted to round up all the studies that look at longer term impacts. And by the way, with games, you don't have to get that long an impact. If you can get an impact for 24 hours, it's not hard to get somebody to play a game for 3 minutes every day if it's important to them. We found in our clinical trial at OSU that one game action, logging in and clicking on one thing a day in the game, was enough to produce the significantly better outcome. But so looking at things, I mean, you can see everywhere from playing, Tetris for 10 minutes. This is the study that everyone's talking about now, right? Playing Tetris for 10 minutes within 24 hours of a traumatic event can reduce flashbacks. And that was tested at over a week time span. Still a week later, they were having fewer flashbacks. So that's interesting. 10 minutes of gameplay can change your mental well-being for a week. If you look at a company like Hope Lab, which has made the remission games for kids fighting cancer, in their clinical trials, they found that playing a game for as little as 2 hours changed behavior in the patients for 3 months. And we know, digging into the neuroscience, the hippocampus is really activated during gameplay, which is a part of the brain associated with learning and memory. So if you can give somebody a transformative experience, say, of feeling more super empowered, feeling optimistic and determined, and have the hippocampus activated, because the hippocampus gets activated whenever we have to try to learn something new. Right? So every game we have to learn how the game works. We have to get better at it. We have to understand the rules and the resources. If you get the hippocampus going, you can actually have a long-term effect. If you play the game a lot, like Tetris, you're not going to necessarily get the hippocampus going. It might not last as long. So that's like one of the things that we can think about is, if we want a longer-term effect, we should be giving people games that are unfamiliar to them, that they've never played before, that might get more hippocampus activation so that it locks in for longer term memory. If we're just skinning games they're familiar with, let's say I don't know, I want to make a serious game and I'm going to just skin Candy Crush Saga with things that have to do with vaccination. If you already know how to play the game, it's probably not going to trigger your hippocampus as much. And so maybe I shouldn't skin an existing game. Maybe I should, design a game that you have to learn how to play. So we can start to look at the research and understand how to change your design.
Yeah, and that to me, I think there's a lot to be said for the importance of novelty and the actual process of learning as being one of the elemental things about why games are so effective in this way, is because you're like engaged with the learning process. And frankly, you could be engaged with any learning, if you could get engaged with any learning process to a similar degree of enthusiasm and excitement, right, you might get that same effect. On this Tetris research, we get a lot of questions, and I'm going to start working some of them in. But on this Tetris research, it was one thing that was very interesting to me when I was reading the book, because one thing that you talked about in the trauma research with Tetris is that it wasn't about erasing bad memories, the effect of Tetris on trauma patients, but rather about being able to control the flashbacks. So using the game to exercise better self-control. And I think that's interesting for 2 reasons, and I want to hear your thoughts on them. The first one is, can you talk a little bit about that effect and why it's not about erasing memory, which is an important distinction. And the second thing is, do you think that people who are more stressed out are actually playing these games subconsciously as a method of controlling that stress already, even without this research?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that first. And we know for sure people are self-medicating with games. Some people effectively and some people counterproductively. And there's a whole chapter in the book about, how you can tell the difference between whether your approach is likely to be helpful or likely to be harmful. But we know, even just looking at, game companies know this. I talk about how, their PopCap games found in a user survey that like half of their players said they were using their games to sort of make themselves psychologically feel better in terms of stress or anxiety or depression. So they're like, oh my God, we need to do research to see, is this actually helping or is this all in their minds? And the research, of course, showed that it does help. But in terms of the Tetris effect and the mind control that we develop when we play games, that's something we see in all categories. The games that work for anxiety, for depression, for pain relief, and for post-traumatic stress disorder, it's all about learning to control your spotlight of attention. So games are just really an incredible way to focus your attention and often to get a very special kind of attention, flow, which I'm sure everybody here in the gamification community is a fan of flow. So generating that specific kind of attention prevents the brain from doing all kinds of things. For example, physical pain. requires blood flow in the brain to the regions of the brain that process and register pain. If you are engaged in an activity that is incredibly resource intensive from a cognitive perspective, all of the blood flow will go to the regions of your brain involved with, for example, visual processing. And there was literally no blood left in the brain to flow to the pain centers. And that's what they find when they put people playing video games in fMRI machines who are in incredible pain, like burn patients. And they see that playing a video game, not only do they feel less pain, they can look at the brain and say, yeah, because all the blood flow is going over here for the video game processing part of the brain, and they can't process the pain. So we see that in everything. And with the Tetris research, if you ask people questions about the trauma that they witnessed, they can still answer factually correct. And, the woman who died was wearing red, things like that. They have the memory, but they are not haunted by these uncontrollable, unconscious flashbacks. And this was really personal for me because I actually suffered from flashbacks from my accident when I hit my head for years. And I would have nightmares that I would wake up convinced that I had hit my head again and that I was going to go through it all again. And I'd have to ask my husband, like, am I okay? Like, did I really hit my head in the night, or was this just, because I would feel like my brain hitting my skull really vividly. So I know how it can feel to have the uncontrollable flashbacks, and it helped me personally using this method and learning to kind of retrain my brain as to what I wanted it to consciously focus on and what it does not need to think about anymore.
So one question that kind of comes up out of that from our list of questions from Ali Reza. Thanks, Ali Reza. Nice to meet you. I think you're a first-time viewer or first-time out of a stealth viewer. So Ali Reza's question is about flow specifically, and whether or not it's possible to create flow that isn't expensive to the user from an energy standpoint. And I know that this is kind of a design question, but I wonder whether or not it's even a good idea to think about creating flow that isn't expensive to the user. Isn't one of the ideas that we're trying to really get them to learn something new or absorb something new? Can you talk a little bit about that flow state and how to design for it optimally and what you learned in doing kind of SuperBetter?
Yeah, so flow can be cognitively and physically exhausting in the sense that you have to bring all of your mental resources and even emotional resources to bear. So I think it is important to design and implement that strategically. But on the same, we don't have any evidence that going into a flow state will deplete your resources. It could be more like, exercise where you work out and then it makes you stronger. And we do see, if you look at some of the neurological literature, for example, getting into a flow state, working on a really hard puzzle, it primes the brain to work harder on other difficult tasks for the next 24 hours. And that has to do with the dopamine flow too. My sense would be you don't want to keep somebody suspended in the flow state for hours. Unless it's the flow state they're getting from hiking a mountain, in which case it's going to take hours. But what you want to do is you want to kind of activate it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, and then use your advantage, right? Use it as a springboard. And so I think instead of trying to design less exhaustive flow experiences, we just need to time, like frame them, bound them, so that you're not missing the opportunity to springboard out of that to tackle, other work, other goals that you might have.
Well, one of my observations about SuperBetter actually was that it's like a series of smallish games, certainly the way the book is structured. Why did you do these like small little challenges and missions throughout the book? And why did you make it into a book at all? Since it's about using games to engage people and change their behavior.
Yeah, well, it is about using games, but it's about the mindset that we adopt when we play games. And I think this is a really big idea that I think has not come across clearly enough in my work until now, and I wanted to write a book about it, which is that, it's not the games that fix our problems. gamification doesn't make us, anything that we're not already. It doesn't give us motivation that we don't already have. It doesn't give us skills that we don't already have.
Right.
Basically, every human who has ever been born, when that person plays games, they naturally use certain psychological strengths that are just a part of play, and particularly goal-driven play. And so those strengths, the ability to supercharge our own motivation and determination to be resilient in the face of setbacks, our ability to agree with others to the set of goals and rules and focus our attention together and ask each other for help, or to anticipate, get into each other's brains if we're not on the same team. We have to kind of get into their minds and anticipate what's going to do next. All of these things that we do naturally when we play games, that's what we need to do when we're facing real life challenges or tackling different goals. And games can help us do that, and digital platforms can help us do that. But they help us because we already have those strengths. And so I wanted to write a book. I mean, one, just to get the scientific research out there, because as you know, people can be skeptical. It's, games can fix everything.
Sure.
Games are like your hammer, and you just want to hammer everything with your big game idea. I wanted to get the research out there and to get the idea of what are these gameful strengths, so that SuperBetter is just one method for cultivating them. I hope that people who are involved in gamification will look at the 7 elements of the gameful mindset that I identify and come up with 100,000 different ways to develop them. By the way, should we give a sneak preview? Should I share what some of the elements of the gameful mindset are?
Oh yeah. And one of the definitely one of the questions that I had for you was to talk about the gameful mindset. So sure, do you want to talk about those 7?
Yeah, let's do a sneak preview, because this book doesn't come out till September 15th, so we'll give people a little.
So they can pre-order SuperBetter now on Amazon.
Yes, and if you pre-order it and you go to my website, I'm giving away free SuperBetter private coaching or gamification design coaching, whichever you want, and all other kinds of prizes. So, but you have to pre-order it to get it. Okay.
And we will get that link up on the screen. We had it in the chat before, so we'll get that link up on the screen. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just read you a couple things that are part of the gameful mindset. Seek out whatever makes you stronger and happier. When you're facing a tough challenge, you need constant access to positive emotions, and you must look after your physical health. In games, we practice this rule by seeking out power-ups, items that make us stronger, faster, and more powerful. Find the heroic story. Look at your life and find the heroic moments. Focus on the strength you've shown and the meaning and purpose to your struggles. In games, heroic stories abound. We often take on the secret identity or avatars of heroic characters as part of the journey. Their stories inspire and motivate us to try harder and become better versions of ourselves. Cultivate connectedness. Try to find at least 2 people you feel you can ask for help and who you can speak to honestly about your stress and challenges. In multiplayer games, we practice the art of making allies, people who understand the obstacles we're facing and who have our back. So those are just a few of the elements of the gameful mindset. And really, it just comes out of, looking at the scientific literature. What do people say are the most important things to be happy, healthy, have courage, be resilient? And then what do we do in games? And the overlap is really remarkable.
And lots of people, myself included, in the chat have been asking you just to go ahead and read the whole book to us. So if everyone just wants to hang out and listen to you read all night.
Dude, I spent 5 days in the studio recording the audiobook. I did not record the audio for Reality's Broken, and I did it this time. And if you can listen to me talk for the 20 hours it takes me to read the book, you are my hero.
We all win coaching with Jane if we can listen to the audiobook. No, it would be great. I'd love to hear you read the audiobook. So one of the questions asked by Sasha, who's been waiting for a while in the queue, is about how SuperBetter is kind of a multiplayer game, and you just talked about seeking out allies, and I know that was a big part of your personal story, getting your sister, getting your husband involved in the process of your own recovery, and that's become a kind of big theme. But we're in an environment where for many people that's actually potentially very challenging because they may not have the social resources to actually make that happen in the first place. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about SuperBetter or using gamification to improve yourself when you're either antisocial or may not have a sufficient social network.
Yes. Well, this is something that I spent a lot of time thinking about how to write the chapter in the book about allies, because there's a significant portion of SuperBetter players, when you look at the data from our users, who are only playing with people they know online, sort of strangers they've met on the SuperBetter forums who might be going through a similar challenge. And so they're sort of allies in that sense, but they don't know each other in real life. They're not meeting up for face-to-face support. And if you look at the results from our users, people do much better when they invite at least one person that they know in everyday life, whether it's a coworker or a relative or a friend. And that improvement is so profound that I actually spend a lot of time designing quests in the book to help people figure out, no, really, there is at least one person that you can ask to play this game with you. And there's all this stuff in the book about, how do you invite someone to play this game with you so it feels like you're just inviting someone to play a game, and you don't need to be as vulnerable as somebody who is asking for help with a problem, which is what stops a lot of people from reaching out. And there are even quests to help you brainstorm. I mean, I've had really random allies. Some of the most important allies to me when I was first doing my recovery was baristas at the local Pete's Coffee. I mean, I cannot tell you how happy it made me to see them every day. And I couldn't have caffeine anymore. And they were giving me decaf coffee. And they were so sweet about it. And they helped me increase my caffeine back over a course of a year from 0 to 5% to 10%. And then they were just helping me, and they were amazing. And there are people around you who will support you if you just express what your goals are, what your quests are, who your bad guys are. So I did really try to think about that because the benefit is so profound. There's a quote in the book that 1 plus 1 may be 2 in mathematics, but in human lives, 1 plus 1 is 1,000 or 1,000,000. Just having somebody. So instead of trying to design experiences for people who don't have social support, I have tried to help people see that they are surrounded by potential allies. That's the title of chapter 2. You are surrounded by potential allies. And you may not believe it, but by the time you're done this book, you will walk outside and you will see how many people there are who are waiting to help.
Well, and I think that's actually really awesome. And I feel like, sometimes it's, even if we're able to help people get to the point of understanding a couple of those small changes in their lives. And this sort of dovetails with the question that Manuel's been asking and waiting for a while about, which is also about the motivational state of people coming into the SuperBetter experience. So can we use gamification or these kinds of gameful interventions like SuperBetter on people who are unwilling or resistant to the idea of being better? And what do we know about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, you can, but it would involve, so there's a technique called motivational interviewing that comes out of the field of psychology. And motivational interviewing is specifically designed for people who are resistant to making a positive change in their lives. Maybe somebody who is struggling with addiction, for example, or has been diagnosed with a treatable disease, but they don't want to follow the treatment plan. Motivational interviewing is something that we've used in conjunction with SuperBetter, and it's something I would recommend people who are interested in doing gamification projects for reluctant communities or reluctant players, to familiarize yourself with this process. It's a process of asking individuals questions about their goals, about their values, and trying to help them come to see for themselves why a certain change is both beneficial and possible. Now, there's nothing particularly gameful about motivational interviewing. It just happens to be a really powerful technique that I learned in the course of doing this research and working with the University of Pennsylvania, where that's something that they use a lot in their clinical psychology practices. So in my experience, when we publish the peer-reviewed research on SuperBetter, we do say in our paper, this may not work for people who are not already motivated to make a positive change. This is something we say right in our paper. And so I'm interested. This is literally something I've been like. I almost made a power pack all about motivational interviewing because I'm giving away a secret power pack to people who pre-order the book, and I almost did it as a motivational interviewing power pack. But I think I'm going to do a little more research and make sure that that's really ready. But so there's so many people to learn about.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the bigger questions, that's come up, and there's actually a whole bunch of people have asked some variant of this question today. Bernardo, Albert, Michael Foulier, thank you, Pepe, thank you for these questions. They're all kind of following a similar vein. So just to pivot from that, there's one aspect of it, which is the end user who might be a little bit resistant. Now, can you talk about ecosystem resistance? So whether that's governments, companies, hospitals, insurance companies. I mean, how far away are we right now from insurance companies paying for SuperBetter as a treatment method? And specifically, Bernardo's question, which is something that comes up over and over again, is about the generational divide. And you've been out there, you've been talking to people about this for some time. You're a big, obviously thought leader and proponent of the idea of using these kinds of interventions to change people's lives. Can you talk about overcoming that resistance?
Yeah, I mean, because we really have this kind of double-edged sword that we are wielding when we are talking about games or gamification. Because on one hand, it's much easier for someone like me to get people to try SuperBetter by describing it like a game, because there's a whole generation of people who find games to be very natural, part of their daily lives. Of course, I'll try this method. But on the other hand, the other side of that sword is people who have a bias against it. So they hear, oh, it's a game. Well, either a game will never help me with depression because games are so trivial, or I'm not a gamer, I don't like to play games. By the way, most people who tell me they're not gamers play games almost every day. They just don't count solitaire or Candy Crush as a game, which is always hilarious.
Which comes up a lot.
Oh, yes, it does. So partly, I mean, I try to use different language when I'm talking to different groups. And we found in the clinical study at OSU, it was a young patient population. Everybody was under 25. And the researchers who were there sort of studying the interactions between the patients and the doctors, they recorded that you'd have a patient who wasn't listening. It was like, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that as part of your recovery. I mean, you've been struggling with concussion for 3 months. You're like so overwhelmed, you can't hear what the doctor's saying. The doctor would say, now I have a game I want you to play. Suddenly they're like, what game? And they're paying attention and they're listening more closely to the advice the doctor's giving them. So for that generation, it's great, it's wonderful, and it works so well. But we do have to be careful with folks that they think they're going to be not able to handle the technology, or it's just not part of their identity. And it is changing. I mean, the people who play games are changing, but we have not changed yet people who identify themselves as gamers or frequent game players. So I do a lot of work when people tell me I don't play games. I'll say, "Oh, really? Like, do you ever play Words with Friends? Or have you, do you do Sudoku or something? And I try to do that, and you find, even with executives, I talk about golf a lot and the gameful qualities of golf. If I'm trying to convince an insurance executive person, to think about this seriously. So you can also go outside the realm of video games to get people thinking like gamers.
So I want to ask you one kind of final question, and before we wrap up today, and it was something actually I've got two questions for you. So one of them is it takes, in the quest that you put in the book, I think it takes till like quest 32, if memory serves, until we get to one where people are designing their own, like 30 or 32. And I wonder if this reflects your fundamental optimism that everybody can be a little bit of a game designer once they have enough skills. Can you talk a little bit about this idea of how people can create or co-create things like SuperBetter for themselves? You're obviously, a scientist and a trained game designer, and that's your background, so you came to it this way. What about average people who don't have that background?
Yeah, so this is kind of in a tangential space, but in the space of games for change or social impact games, we are seeing tremendous results from projects where they are teaching people to design games about social issues rather than taking $1 million or $10 million and designing their own game about a social issue. We are seeing more engagement, more learning, more opinion shifting, more empowerment when you get people involved in a game jam or learning something as simple as game star mechanic and making their own games about a social issue, either of their choosing or a social issue that the whole group is working on. And to me, that's a really important signal that is relevant to the space of gamification and gameful design, which is when people are designing their own games, there is a level of understanding and a level of investment, kind of emotional investment, that is really significant. And that's why, you know, I've been giving a lot of interviews about this book, and one phrase I keep saying is, I want you, by the time you're done the book, to be able to design your own game. I mean, your life is your own game. And I want you to understand the techniques that game designers use to cultivate all of these psychological strengths in players, to build the optimism, the determination, and the ability to ask for help and all these things so that you can just do that in your own life. And it's when you look at the data from our players of SuperBetter, the people who do the best are the ones who are creating their own power-ups, creating their own bad guys, designing their own quests, or having their friends and family design the quest for them. It's not necessarily the people who are just playing the pre-designed game. So that is my goal, and what I try to get people designing their own quests in the book, so that because I know it will work better for you if you become your own game designer.
Right, and I think there's a lot to that, right? There's a level of investment and a level of engagement that's different from before. Okay, our final question for today is this. So in the book, in SuperBetter, you talk about the effect of virtual doppelgangers on people doing physical fitness work. Mm-hmm. And this was especially interesting to me because there's this effect, that you talk about how people who were playing a physical fitness game with a virtual doppelganger that looks like them actually got better workouts, right? Ultimately, versus doppelgangers or avatars that didn't really look like them, and compared to people who may have done it without any virtual intercession. And I guess a question that I have for you is, if you project forward in this SuperBetter world, more gameful play, especially as it relates to physical fitness and this kind of thing, is the future of working out, does it look like us playing kind of Wii Sports all the time? I know this sounds like a naive question, but would we really be better off at a gym where we're all standing in front of screens?
Okay, no end. So this is like a no end.
Okay, fine.
One of the big things that I'm seeing when I look at all the games that have successfully changed behavior is that you do not need to keep playing the game to have a consistent benefit. You need that breakthrough, transformative experience that builds self-efficacy or that engages the hippocampus and that changes your behavior for long term. For SuperBetter, we think you need to play for 6 weeks and you get that benefit. For Hope Lab, it was 2 hours, and for this physical fitness world, the place where you really need this kind of an avatar or game enhanced experience is when you're trying something new. You're starting a new fitness routine. I've never worked out with weights before. I've never run on a treadmill before. I've never done CrossFit before, whatever it is. And you're trying to get out of your comfort zone and build a sense of capability and self-confidence. That is where having this avatar that amplifies, the avatar is getting fit and strong, and it's kind of amplifying the positive feedback that you're getting from the experience and kind of overtaking nerves and self-doubt. That's when you need it. So I would say, yes, we would see everybody the first time they come to a gym. This should be part of their orientation package. But I would hope within a month you don't need it. I don't want people staring at screens all the time. I don't think people need gameful support forever. And it's my hope that you create transformative experiences that change people's sense of self. And then once they have that, then they can do anything on their own.
There could be no better way sort of for us to, to connect the dots and the thinking, right? Which is that this super better is a great way to transform people's lives. But once we build that resilience, once we build that muscle, right, then they can do that on their own. And so with that, Jane, everybody's been asking us to keep talking forever, but we can't. So I hope that we get to see each other soon. Maybe we'll get a chance to see you at G Summit or another time.
Yeah.
Early next year. In the meantime, folks can pre-order your book Super Better on Amazon.
And can I just say,
or
by the
they can go to
way,
Gene.
I haven't been able to talk about this cover yet, but I feel like
Oh yeah.
these folks will appreciate it. So I asked the book designer to design it to look like a power up in a game so that it's like radiating and you just like want to reach out and like touch it and collect it. So that's why the book looks like this. It's like a power up that you can reach out and grab it.
That's awesome. And that's why you guys should all buy the hardcover version and the audiobook and the digital version. You can never have too many versions of Super Better. Jane McGonigal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, G Summit and Gamification community. I love you guys.
And we love you back. You guys can follow Jane at Avant Game on Twitter if you're not already, and you should be, and me at GZakurum on Twitter as well. You guys, it's been great. Jane's been awesome. You guys rock. We'll see you in a couple weeks again here on the Gamification Revolution. In the meantime, everybody, keep having fun. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.